Welcome to Postwave. Today we're talking about artificial intelligence, and we're kind of focusing around a couple chapters from this book by philosopher Nick Bostrom, Superintelligence.
When we give birth to an artificial intelligence, how can we ensure that the results won't be entirely catastrophic?
I heard about this guy, Yosha Bach, the other day, who's this artificial intelligence researcher, and he was talking about how the Turing test is kind of there's like another level to it that's a test for us, because we don't actually know if we have general intelligence or not.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like, we don't even, because we don't even really know what that means. We haven't really defined it.
Yeah. It makes me think about those SMBC comics where there's the robot sitting around and thinking, can humans have consciousness? Do humans feel? Can humans love?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was super, super fascinating.
I will tell you right off the bat, I was not crazy about Nick Bostrom's writing.
Really?
Yeah. It's written like a grad student.
Yeah, I mean he's a straight up philosopher, so he's gonna write like that.
But I don't think it has to be that way. I think that's an artifice that has evolved from academia, where you have a culture of like showing off how smart you are to other people, even at the expense of making your ideas coherent. Like, you have to veil your ideas in this hyper intellectual language that doesn't lend anything to communicating your ideas. Just like, it makes it harder to read, and then it makes it so that you sound smart.
That's interesting. I mean, that happens. I feel like I've seen way more egregious examples.
Oh, of course. I have one I want to share with you. Yeah, here we go. We operationalize attention as this differential allocation of information processing resources, whereby allocation can be achieved by multiple modes and within multiple domains.
What don't you get about that? Yeah, I mean, I see the point. What year is that book from?
I think early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a pretty technical book on a pretty technical topic, so I feel like it's gonna...
Yeah, but I feel like the ideas here, I mean, when they're not talking about like actual physical, like biology things within the brain, the ideas are like they shouldn't require that kind of language. Like when he's talking on the broad scope, like,
yeah,
that should be like intelligible.
Yeah, I know. You definitely have a point. Yeah, I mean, it turns into a dick measuring contest at a certain point.
Yeah. And I feel like Nick Bostrom wants us to know he's got a big one.
So first impressions, not...
I wasn't wholly blown away by the writing style.
Yeah.
He has some interesting ideas, but at the same time, it's like it feels more to me like an anthology of ideas that have been put forth by people who actually like felt the ideas and like truly considered him. And he's just kind of like, here are some ideas some people have had. This is how they fit together, kind of, which is interesting. It's like, it's a good resource, I think, if you can wade through the language of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the rest of the book kind of puts that in context. That's interesting. I wouldn't have expected anyone to say that. So is it just like him? Because I feel like a lot of the articles he cites it's like research he did.
So like some of the ideas in chapter 9 that he references that often don't have citations, but just like the list of all possible capability control methods that he posits, like, is that did he come up with those, or are those just like ideas that he's gathered?
No, I mean, he's kind of at the center of this field, and he's worked with a bunch of grad students on things, I think. I mean, not just grad students, but, you know, like colleagues and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that there's a bunch of people working on all these different approaches at different universities and different research groups, and that, yeah, I mean, part of the point of the book and of the chapters is to like sum up like what the state of the art is. But I think a lot of it, I mean, this is kind of like AI safety 101. So like, it kind of makes sense. This book is a lot like it's kind of like a textbook. That's how I think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of has that vibe.
Yeah, and I think it's valuable in that regard that it at least posits all these ideas, but the way it's written never makes me feel like he has considered any of them. Well, that's not fair to say, but just that he doesn't seem to embrace any of the ideas he puts forward. He just sort of has them or shares them. Which, again, I guess that's not a criticism, because you can find value in that.
Yeah. I think part of what you're getting at is he actually says in the first chapter or two something like, all of this is maybe wrong. A lot of this is definitely wrong. You know, people are going to look back in 50 years and say, what the hell was this guy thinking for most of it? But we have to start thinking about it now, and so these are my thoughts, and so I think part of that is that he then goes on to just kind of brainstorm every possibility rather than like fixate on one that he thinks is more likely.
Yeah.
Because the reality is we don't really know which one's going to be more effective. The thing we should be doing now is figuring out like all the possible different approaches.
Yeah, that's valid.
Because it's going to be like a combination of them in the end, probably.
Yeah, or maybe not, but
I mean, yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't criticize him for putting his work out there. I mean, I think really, it can't hurt anything anyway. and it may well inspire people, so
yeah. So where are you at on the question of whether AI safety is worth worrying about right now, and how much it's worth worrying about?
100%. Like, we got to deal with this shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sold on the idea of technological singularity. I think it's happening, and I think it's gonna happen soon. That's just my gut. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
I could be completely wrong, but that's what I feel.
I mean, it's gonna happen sooner than we expect it to, I think, whatever that means. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if it hasn't happened by 2050, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's happening. I think it can well be catastrophic, and we'd better start thinking about it now while we still can.
Yeah. So the idea of a singularity is that at some point our technology will be able to improve itself more effectively than we can improve it, and then it'll kind of outstrip us in intelligence and just kind of general effectiveness, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think for that to happen, though, it has to have, rather than just being intelligence, I think it has to have consciousness as well.
Yeah. Why do you say that?
Because we have some form of consciousness, and I think that above all gives us an edge. And if it does not have consciousness, while it still could be incredibly dangerous, I don't think it could have a broad enough intelligence that we wouldn't be able to control it, maybe.
Yeah. I guess my whole question is how tied is consciousness to like having a body and having sensory systems in the way that we have sensory systems?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
Yeah, which I feel like we don't really know, because I mean, one of my suspicions is that it has something to do with literally just like perception in 3D space, like imagining yourself as this object, that because so much of your brain is devoted to the 3D construction of your surroundings, right, based on your vision, that maybe that process in some way creates the idea that like there's a center, like maybe that's where your sense of self comes from.
Interesting. I agree that perception is kind of the root of sense of self and of consciousness. I think that that's the core of everything, and so I would say that a true consciousness is inextricably linked to perception. The realms of perception, I think, can be widely varied, not just to the physical senses that we possess, but even awarenesses within our social structures and other arbitrary structures that arise.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
So, for example, you had talked about like consciousness is like a spatial awareness in 3 spatial dimensions, and as a physical object that's centered in a place. But I was thinking as well, you could let's say you're in the court in some historical setting, you're a court gentleman or something, and your whole life is basically built around knowing where you are in the social structure and how to navigate that. Well, while that's an abstract notion, that's a very tangible part of your life that has significant repercussions into your well-being.
Okay. I think that makes sense.
Oh, good.
And that, okay, but how does that?
Well, that would be a form of consciousness just as much as an awareness of your physical location in space.
Okay, yeah, I see. Yeah, I mean, anything that helps you relate to like agents or just objects or forces outside of the thing that you have control over, I feel like that would create some kind of feeling of consciousness, possibly.
Yeah, the interaction of agents. To quote Alan Watts, I push against you and you push against me, and we both know we're here.
That's pretty hot.
You like it rough, baby?
Okay, so to bring it back to the book, I'm curious what you think like the most promising of the different control methods.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I'd like to completely dismiss any capability control options. I think that's hopeful thinking, and And furthermore, to the point where I don't think we could do anything, because it would presuppose a knowledge of the structure of this being, which is not a fair presupposition, because if we knew how it would be shaped, then we'd already have it because we'd have made it. The thing about it is that we're trying to make it make itself, so it will form a structure that we're unfamiliar with, and how can we even hope to be able to confine it in that, if that's the case?
Yeah, that's a good question. He talks about stunting, I think, a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
That's one of the...
Yeah, which is interesting.
Somehow that just feels like horribly, horribly wrong to me, like on a moral level.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's not like it's painful as far
pain. But Trevor, you know that my understanding of pain is not like pain is endurable. That's not what makes something undesirable or bad.
Okay.
Yeah, because pain is just a system that gives us information about the shape of our world, and change and growth induce pain just as much as anything else. So it's kind of a necessary part of life. But to have something that is profoundly limited and unhealthy in a place where it could be thriving, that just feels wrong to me.
Yeah, I mean, depends how... Yeah, it depends how consciousness would, like, how the lights would turn on as the thing got smarter and smarter, which of course we really, really don't know at what point. If it would just be, like a instantly on at some point, or whether it would be gradual, or what would happen.
But so here's a more cogent reason why I think stunting is not going to work, which he does touch on. He brings up the point that if you have a stunted AI, eventually you're going to have someone else make a not stunted AI, and then you're in the same problem as you started with.
Right.
And even if you have systems in place to try to prevent that, there's going to be an arms race. There's going to be people actively trying to create an ever less confined AI until eventually someone's going to cross the line and it will be able to break out of the confines that you've created for it.
Yeah, I think he takes a whole chapter to talk about like race dynamics and how it would play out if there's multiple teams like competing and how close they are, and basically there's they all have to make a trade-off between safety and speed.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it's not good if there's multiple people racing.
Yeah, in our free market society.
Yeah. Or, and especially if it's like, if it ends up being like us in Russia or us in China or something like that, I mean, that could get out of hand, like,
Yeah.
So you didn't think capability control would work at all?
Yeah. So one other idea he posited in that category was tripwires.
Uh-huh.
But the problem for me with tripwires is that it necessitates us predicting the exact internal structures that will result in the undesired outcome, right? And we have to predict exactly how this thing, like what's going to go wrong, or what's going to be indicative of something going wrong. Which maybe in certain cases could prevent an outcome, but it's like you could still have an AI that could predict the possibility of there being tripwires and act to avoid them, to sidestep them, or to stay passively until it can safely dismantle them.
Yeah. I mean, I think in all these situations we're talking anyway about something that's in a box and is like some kind of isolated thing where you can't broadcast radio waves out, you can't no electromagnetic radiation, that kind of thing. So that, like, you can even tell if it's somehow communicating with the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I don't. Yeah.
But the thing about it is, if it's such a super intelligence that it's capable of manipulating us, if it knows us well enough that it could play us like instruments, if it has any output whatsoever, which it has to, then it can use that particular output to manipulate us in whichever way it does.
Yeah, so actually, he talks about this in chapter 10, and there's a couple different ways to get around that, and one of the ways is to build what's called an oracle, which is basically it's just a text interface, right? And you just ask a question and it gives you an answer, and you could restrict that even to just yes or no answers.
I don't think that's enough.
Yeah, you might be right.
Because it entirely depends on the questions we ask it. If we ask it huge questions and it answers them in remarkable ways, like, that's proving its value. It will become an object of value, and as such it will have slightly more control, and will be able to use that control or influence over the world to increase its influence.
Yeah.
Wholly through manipulating us, I mean.
Yeah, I just have to, like, I have to think that the people working on that project would have thought very carefully about what kinds of ways it would try to manipulate them. And
yeah, you'd hope, but like, we can't really, like, even if you get extremely trustworthy and sensible people, if you have something that can understand a person or persons all the way through every little piece of them, there's nothing you can do against that. Even if it plays a long game, it may well have to play a long game, but there's no reason why it would have any sort of a time limit, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the kind of the kicker is that a corrupt AI will play along like it's a good AI until it can escape.
Exactly.
And so, like, 'cause that's what it has to do. So, like, yeah, anything that would, even if we stunt it or like limit it to the point where it can't possibly affect us, it's only a matter of time before it's granted that power.
Yeah, and so all of these preventative control methods, they feel like just the wrong approach to me. Yeah. Like, it's the same thing as, like, if there's someone who you don't like what they're doing, and so rather than like talking to them about it, rather than getting on the same page, you just go over there and you punch him in the face and kick him and say, "There, do you get it?" That's not gonna work.
Wow. It's a violent analogy.
Yeah, and these are violent things that are being presented here. Confining it, doing violence to its ability to think, threatening to kill it if it steps one step out of line.
Okay, so what do you think about the idea that we create like 4 or 5 of these things and then they all kind of balance the power?
How would that work?
Well, we'd have to create them in a certain way that they have knowledge about each other, and they have I think he was saying like they have slightly different programs from each other. I might be thinking of the thing he was talking about where literally the structure of the AI is like a supervisor and then 2 subordinaries, right? And then like each one of those has 2 subordinaries, and they're all kind of monitoring each other from the top down. Part of it is that I think it's actually the smartest AI units are like on the bottom, so like the most, and so like it's literally like the further up the chain you go, the dumber it gets until you get back to the human, who's running it at the top.
Wow, that's so wonderfully analogous to certain situations that we're facing in the present.
Yeah. But that could also be mind crime. And then he I think he literally talks about like if that was the way to do it, we would have to like offer these consciousnesses to be able to just like check out of the project if they wanted to.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and then that we would like reboot them at some point.
Yeah, actually I was thinking about, wow, okay, that's really cool, because I had this thought that I thought was unrelated while I was reading his book. I was thinking in terms of free will, and I forget how I came to this conclusion, but I had the thought that in order to have free will, you have to have the ability to check out at any time. So say, I'm not going to participate in achieving this, whatever the goal is, if I don't want to.
Interesting.
Because if you don't have that freedom, then your actions are confined to completing the goal, which is a limiting set of actions.
So I would agree that you choosing not to do something is your will, but it doesn't make it free will.
How do you mean? What's the difference?
Well, like, I mean, we all have like desires and preferences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and we don't choose those. They're a product of our genes and our experience.
Sure.
And so, if you're choosing not to do something, it's because of some desire or preference in you that you didn't choose and you didn't create. So how can it be free? Okay, so do you accept that like genes determine a lot of what makes you as a person?
Sure, yeah.
And then the rest is just your environment?
Mm-hmm. Although
right?
I wouldn't put a percentage either way.
Right. But where is there room in that for like some magical little like spark to come in there and say, oh, I'm gonna, like not do this thing or do this thing, or have impart some kind of like super deterministic action on the world?
Well, because those structures that you've just put forward, the things that caused you to be in the place you are now, all of those things exist in the past. The past has an interesting thing about it. You can't change it, right? It seems to be deterministic, right?
Right.
The past is fixed. You can't undo something that's already happened.
Right.
But your experience occurs in the present.
Mm-hmm.
And in the present moment, you have the freedom to make decisions. Or I'll say that a different way. You can and you do make decisions. That those decisions you make affect what will happen in the future.
Right, of course. But you making the decision is continuous with like the rest of the universe that came before you, and you didn't, like, there wasn't something magical that happened where you suddenly changed.
Okay, yeah. I mean, there doesn't have to be any magic. There doesn't have to be any force, but you can imagine situations in the present where multiple outcomes could happen potentially. and there's no reason to assume that only one possible outcome could have happened. Just because that's what did happen doesn't mean that's what had to have happened.
And that's an interesting question.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I can't speak affirmatively, but I can at least say you can't disprove that.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of gets to the question of if the many world interpretation of quantum mechanics is true, like why are we in this certain branch of the wave function that we are? Like why does our consciousness follow this one particular path?
Yeah.
Rather than the other, the infinite other number of ways that the thing could have gone.
Mm-hmm.
And is it just that basically it manifests as like an infinite universe where it's literally just like discrete instances of the consciousness.
So how I've had it described to me by people in YouTube videos is that you have, so we'll talk specifically about the position of a particle when it's being determined, and there's like different probabilities that it will be in different places. And maybe there's a higher probability that it's in one place, but there's a little bit of a probability that it's somewhere else. And then it's kind of like if you had a random number picked with those odds, like maybe there's a 90% chance it's in one place and a 10% chance it's in the other, then if you were to have that and able to do it like 10 times, you'd more likely have a bunch in the 90 and a few in the 10. But every time a decision is made, that it's just picking a random outcome out of those probabilities.
So wait, what do you mean by random? If it's
yeah, wherein lies the agency.
Yeah, like randomness doesn't. I mean, I think it's possible that free will is what randomness feels like. Like we could attribute that feeling to randomness, but that doesn't mean that it's free will, because that implies that there's something outside that is controlling.
But what is making a decision that it's in one place versus the other? Like that force, that has to be the agent right there.
Right. I mean, there's an agent, but like, okay, so you agree that your body is continuous with the universe, right?
Yeah.
So, like when you're making a decision, it's just some electrical signals in your brain that are happening because of sensory input from the rest of your body, right?
That's a description of what's happening, but I don't think it's getting at the core of what's happening.
So what is the core of what's happening?
That you have a decision made in determining the position of some particle, that making of a decision is an act of choice. It's an agent that's making that. So you could phrase it that the ability to make those decisions is what free will is. So if you are the thing that is making decisions, then you have free will.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to define it that way, but I guess it's kind of, I guess the thing I have more of a problem with is like saying there are like multiple possibilities and then one happens because, yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, like I said, I think it's that the universe that your consciousness inhabits is kind of one stream of experience that's set. It's not like randomly just manifesting itself in one way that could have gone several other ways. Because I feel like isn't that that's like the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, is that it's that the wave function collapses, right? And that when you observe something, that's when the wave function collapses, right? And it could have been anything before that. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I still don't know if that implies free will, but I think it's way more likely that the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is correct. Just because, from what I understand, it seems to follow more logically from what we know at this point, and it relies less upon this weird thing that happens when an observation or measurement is made. That it doesn't get rid of it, but it deals with that problem a little bit.
I guess I'm not super versed on the details of it, so I can't
Yeah, I mean, many worlds
that.
is just like everything that can happen is happening all the time in infinite iterations.
But what does "is" mean? Like, if it is, where is it?
Well, no, I think
why can't
my
we see it?
is that, I mean, the universe could be infinite. We don't actually know that it has a boundary. Even if the Big Bang is right, it could be. It's totally possible that the universe is infinite and also expanding somehow, right? And if that's the case and it goes on forever, then you would see every possibility be manifested, right? So if it's an infinite universe, like that would seem to make sense. But it would still be like there are at least us conscious beings. It seems like there's continuous that have objects that persist and that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
So to bring it back to Bostrom again, what did you think of the idea that the AI might believe itself to be in a simulation and act accordingly?
I feel like that was some of the most idealist thinking that I've seen in a long time.
It's quite the statement.
Uh-huh.
Say more about that.
It is, the way he writes about it is like there's so many assumptions in there about, like, oh, well, clearly it would come to this conclusion and therefore it would decide to act this way. It's like, no, it could come to a different conclusion, or it could come to that conclusion and it could act in a completely different way than you think it would.
Yeah, I mean, it is okay, but it is interesting to think about because a lot of the smartest people now, like including Elon Musk, believe pretty strongly that we are living in a simulation, and so I think we'd have to consider whether an AI would recognize that possibility.
Yeah, but so like what he posits is, again, the paperclip example from Wait But Why. He talks about how, oh, well, it would probably just keep making paperclips because even if it thought it was probably in a simulation, it would just keep making simulated paperclips because there's some possibility that it's not. Or he doesn't talk about how maybe the AI would say, oh, okay, how am I going to break out of this simulation into base reality so that I can actually start making paperclips?
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's no way to assume the way it's going to allocate its resources.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, none of it's for sure. Right, and then he quotes Hamlet. Pretentious motherfucker.
Grad student. His writing is like an essay that a smart person writes for a class where they actually don't have any thoughts about the thing they're writing about. Wow. we can cut that out. I don't need to be that scathing.
I'm just so shocked. What? I didn't say any of this shit about infinite jest, even though I totally could have.
Oh yeah, you could have. For sure. Yeah, I know. I don't know, maybe it just hits too close to home. Maybe it just feels like too many essays that I've written in my past.
I still think that feeling might stem just from that he's like trying to think out every possibility and moving like very quickly and because at this point in the game in at this stage in AI safety research, we really don't know a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said before, I think it's important just to try to think of as many different avenues as possible before we go down one for 50 years without considering what other things could have happened.
Yeah, definitely. So Nick also talks about how we could control its motivation and
I mean, it has something to do with the values that we want it to act by, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How do we decide those?
Yeah, I think he talks in a later chapter about he talks about coherent extrapolated volition, which, if I remember right, is some way of determining, averaged out over all of humanity, what we want as a species.
So egalitarian.
Yeah. So I don't think you would be into that anyway.
Yeah. No.
So
yeah. What if most people are wrong?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of. I mean, it's accounting for that. Our coherent extrapolated volition is our wish if we knew more, thought faster, were more the people we wished we were, had grown up farther together, where the extrapolation converges rather than diverges, where our wishes cohere rather than interfere, extrapolated as we wish that extrapolated, interpreted as we wish that interpreted.
Wow. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, doesn't he say as well, like we could basically ask it to give us what we would have asked it for if we were our best selves?
Yeah.
There might be something to that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it has to understand, but it has to understand what we mean by best selves, which I feel like implies understanding what we think is best, which is the whole problem that we're trying to.
You're right. Yeah. Yeah. Just shunting the issue aside.
But I mean, I think it's possible that at some point it'll understand human psychology better than we do, and it'll be able to tell us what we actually want.
Yeah. In fact, doesn't it have to, in order to?
I mean,
in order to function properly.
I guess like a true like general AI that can interact with humans and stuff would have to, yeah.
Because if Johnny Boy McPaperclip Man says, "I want paperclips, make me paperclips," the AI has to understand that what Johnny Boy McPaperclip Man really wants is wealth and to be a valued member of his society and produce a commodity that is useful and become well off because of that. And so it would have to make a value judgment and say, I know you asked to give me the most paper clips, but I don't think you really want that. I think you want these other things because I know you pretty well. I probably know you better than yourself. So I'm going to give you something different.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's what we want, I think. Something like that.
And so in order to get to that state, we have to surrender to it our agency. We have to give it agency.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of inevitable if we want to actually use it for all the great things people want to use it for, like, technological advancement and, automating everything.
So we don't have to work anymore.
That's what it's really all about.
Yeah. Minimizing effort. Maximizing screen time. The heart asks. How does this tie into David Foster Wallace's idea of obsession, about how people have a tendency to obsess and can act self-destructively in fixating on certain things.
That's interesting. I mean, I think it's basically that our brains are trying to maximize something, right? And a lot of the times it's like a hit of dopamine or oxytocin or something. Or, you know, if we're obsessed with something, it's that thing that we're obsessed with that we have to do to maximize this like reward function in our brain, right? And it's kind of beyond our control, right? At a certain point, that's kind of what defines an obsession.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, it seems similar to an AI that's very laser focused on one thing, maximizing one thing at the expense of all else.
Yeah. If we were to ask it to give us the things that we want, like what we want is maybe not the thing that's best for us.
Like what would be an example of that?
Oh, well, for example, I personally really get off on armadillos, and I think that we should cultivate a society centered around the armadillo fetish and fetishizing armadillos. I think that's what our society needs, our species.
So you want to get the AI to build that world for you?
Yes. You'll be a complacent member, correct?
I mean, I don't know enough of the details yet.
Trevor's a hard maybe.
How many armadillos does each person get?
That's the deciding factor, right? As many as the AI can produce. Did you ever watch that old anime from the 80s, Akira?
No.
It's a beautiful movie. Really immaculately done. All done by hand, actually, which is incredible. Such a powerful piece of work. And it has this part, a central part, where there's this kid. Spoiler alert, by the way. He's just like a guy, you know, he's maybe a bit of a hothead. He likes to ride motorcycles around and stuff, but he's just a kid, and he gets in contact with this thing that basically gives him power, like an insane amount of power. And he is manifest, like all of his inner impulses is manifest upon the world as this like humongous entity that he like physically blows up into this humongous hideous blob of like compulsion and like rage and just unbound emotion, and he's just this great catastrophic destructive force unleashed upon the world.
Wow. So how do you see that connecting to the AI thing?
Well, if we have a manifestation of our own desires, which is what Akira was, you know, he had these desires and impulses, and he suddenly had power to manifest it on the world. If we have that with all our pathos and everything built in, it's going to be the same.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of an argument against whole brain emulation, as opposed to like actually artificial intelligence. Because it is likely that whole brain emulation would it would carry along all the like the reptilian brain parts that are just kind of base desires and greed and all that kind of stuff, and would basically just give them the power to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to think about whether we want them to have anything like emotion or any kind of even pain. I mean, it seems like if we can create a entity without pain, that's kind of the right thing to do.
I disagree. I think that's a commonly held belief. I mean, people tend to try to avoid pain, but that's the nature of pain. I wouldn't want to live without pain. Pain is an incredibly valuable source of information.
Right, but if you didn't need it, like if you didn't have to worry about, burning your hand or, because it's like, it's only very rarely that it's sending you a message that you can act upon.
But I think there's different kinds of pain that we have to consider. Like, sure, there's the physical, but there's also emotional pain and the kind of pain you experience when there's something that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you witness something horrible, and I think it would be wrong or even impossible to have an understanding of that thing you witnessed without experiencing it as a sort of pain.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting metaphorical now, I think. It's the word pain.
You could well say that, although for me the deeper understanding of the word pain is the metaphorical one as opposed to the purely physical.
Yeah.
Because
I guess pain might be as simple as like going against the reward function. I mean, right? Like the thing that you don't want to do. Although it probably wouldn't be that simple because none of this stuff is, but something like that.
Like, what if you're just there in a place and you witness something really horrible happen? Like, you just see this converging of events happen, and maybe a child is murdered, for example. And if you just sit there and watch it happen, for you to understand that, and let's say for the sake of argument that we value the child and we say that that's something we don't want to have happen to that. If you just sit there and watch it, that has to be a formative experience, because you have a choice. You could either sit there and watch it happen, or you could try to make it not happen. And maybe if you try and you fail, I don't know, maybe that is pain, maybe that isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think pain might be way more specific than we think. It might literally just be tied to a brain and the way our brain has evolved and the way our nervous system has evolved. Maybe it's not even a meaningful thing to talk about with AI, but I think if you take seriously that consciousness is a possibility with an artificial intelligence, I think you have to take the possibility that they can experience pain seriously.
Definitely.
Yeah. But yeah, it's how do you even define what that means, what pain means? That's interesting.
I mean, I've had experiences that I would describe as an intense pain, but they were entirely mental processes, not related to any physical external input.
Yeah.
Actually, I'd like to share for you some lyrics that I wrote that I think share this idea. So here's an experience of pain that isn't tied at all to an external stimulus. I fragment. I am two unanswered questions. Two branches of myself collide, sickening, converge, a multitudinous conflagration of being. Collapse. I do battle against myself. Why? How could this happen? How could I have brought so much hatred against myself? I am afraid of myself. I am. Who am I?
Damn.
To me, that's what pain is. It's not the physical.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have something there about like, it's like you're kind of eating away at yourself. Like you're there's two parts of you that are doing battle somehow, and it's like dissonant.
Yeah, dissonant.
And your brain is trying to resolve itself.
Mm-hmm. It's like an inefficient situation where it could be better.
Yeah.
But it isn't. And so you want to make it better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could find anything that's like a motivating factor as some kind of pain, either a pain or a reward.
Yeah, I think so. To quote Marcus Aurelius again, he has this idea that chronic pain is always endurable because unendurable pain brings with it its own end.
So that sounds really dark.
He gets really dark. He's
yeah.
Over the course of the books he's writing, he's slowly succumbing to his injuries that he's amassed over his life.
Yeah. Damn. So he's literally talking about
physical
pain. If a pain is truly unendurable, you'll end it.
Yeah, either you'll end it or you'll suffer a small death where that part of you that is so overstimulated will tap out and then you won't feel it anymore.
Wow. Like I probably experienced a lot of pain.
I think so.
His life.
Yeah. Here's an interesting quote. He deposits his sperm and leaves, and then a force not his takes it and goes to work and creates a child. This from that? Or he pours food down his throat, and then a force not his takes it and creates sensations, desires, daily life, physical strength, and so much else besides. To look at these things going on silently and see the force that drives them, as we see the force that pushes things and pulls them, not with our eyes, but just as clearly.
Sounds like entropy in the arrow of time.
Yeah.
It's like what's pushing everything.
Tell me more.
So, I mean, biology is just one of the ways the universe is increasing entropy by increasing heat, and dissipating energy very efficiently. And so when we're eating or, reproducing, or growing, that's just a manifestation of the increasing entropy of the universe. And that's kind of the force that's driving all of this at like the most basic level.
At the same time, when you have like the creation of a child, like that's going against the trend of nature.
Yeah, I mean it's creating order, but it's very expensive, and that order gives off a lot of heat, right? And and then that being will take in a bunch of food and energy and dissipate that as heat as well. So there's like a decrease in entropy for the person, while they're alive, because that's kind of what homeostasis is, right? It's maintaining like a consistent internal state.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it can only do that for so long, right? It can only maintain that internal state for so long before it, has to disintegrate and increase in entropy.
Mm.
So like it's not free that it's staying ordered, because it has to increase entropy around it its whole life in order to stay ordered.
Yeah. So coming back to the Bic Nostrum, so we're thinking that maybe we shouldn't try to control it so much.
I mean, I think what we want is for us to be able to teach it somehow, like gradually, and have it pointed initially towards some pretty broad goals, and it can kind of interrogate us as to whether it's approaching those or not as it develops.
So part of that being gradual then would be us learning from it what we want.
Yeah, because the whole problem is kind of we don't know what to tell it to do. So, but we can kind of give it approximate guesses. Okay, so this is called motivational scaffolding, and it's basically you give the AI some kind of crude interim goal system that as the system increases in ability, it can kind of begin to modify the goals.
That seems promising to me. I think the actual implementation of it, I have no idea how to approach, but
Yeah,
it seems like that could potentially lend good results.
yeah. Of all the ways that all seem to have holes in them, that it seems like a pretty solid one.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're learning how to fly. People who learn how to be pilots, when you first go up, you are in the co-pilot seat, and then maybe you're in the pilot seat, but you still have a co-pilot who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and I think that'd be the easiest way to ensure a really effective relationship between the AI and the team that's working on it, so that they kind of stay in tandem, and there's not this one big moment where the button gets turned on and all of a sudden they have to see if it works. I mean, it's probably pretty obvious, but I think you want some kind of like very active back and forth between the AI and the team that's working on it.
Communication breeds a healthy relationship.
Okay. Well, we haven't even talked about this yet. What do you think all this is going to mean for music and art when this intelligence explosion takes place?
That's a really interesting question, and I actually have thought about this. There's a journal entry that I wrote a year or two ago that I'd like to share that directly relates to that question. As further developments in AI continue to undermine my concept of self, of what it means to be an artist, be conscious, an agent, in control of my own destiny, I cannot help but cast about for ways in which humans will still be relevant when we are inevitably eclipsed on the stage of creation. A computer will never write a novel. A computer will never paint a truly great work of art. But with every step of progress toward our ineffable goal of productivity, these mantras seem to weaken and buckle beneath the crushing weight of new creations generated by machine learning. There is some little hope in the concept of centaurs, human-AI partnerships, that, at least for now, perform better than AI alone. However, the painting this renders is a bleak one, for we must consider that only an elite subgroup of humans will enhance a partnership, whereas the vast majority of humans may have nothing to offer in this context. Providing that we are able to surpass the barriers of arriving at a stable and healthy environment, we can presume that these few highly functioning individuals may arise from anywhere in the world. Therefore, the only value the majority of people can hope to provide is to be a part of an ever-growing gene pool whose sole purpose is, if not to be one of those rare prodigies, then to live their lives demurely and procreate with the hopes of one day creating offspring that will participate directly in a human-AI partnership. I am struck with an image of a setting sun, a circle where a line dissects it, separating a tiny sliver off the top from the iceberg below. The individuals who find themselves above the line are those who create value. The rest of us exist only to populate and serve these ranks, and in this we eke out a marginal value in our own lives. The sun never rises any further above the horizon, though it does grow ever greater in size. In these bleak musings, I am brought back to wondering, what can a human do that a computer cannot? And an answer may come to you, a human can love. But what is human love? How can we claim that it cannot ever be fully understood if we ourselves cannot understand it? And if we can, then how could not another? If we can break it down into its constituent parts, then surely so too a computer can do this? And how can we hope to know the capacity for compassion that this hitherto unknown entity, our soon-to-be younger digital sibling, will hold? We cower as if expecting that it will be none, that it will bear nothing but contempt for us if it regards us in any way at all. It is what we have learned to expect from a remorseless world, after all, or perhaps we feel we must deserve it. Our crimes laid bare in the cutting light of its omniscient gaze, our violence, our greed, our weakness. Perhaps we long for the barren, grassy fields of Ellis Island that is our birthright, and the only peace we will ever know, the inevitable end to an identity formed and defined by violence. But perhaps we will be met by understanding and acceptance of who we have been made to be, and a solution to deliver us from our own torment. In the light of this, I am brought back to the same question. What can humans do that AI can't? And the thought comes to me, what else but the carnal act of lovemaking? A coupling for the sake of pleasure and none other. An entirely purposeless act, just for the feeling that it itself defines. Yes, you may call it hedonistic, but the salvation of humanity is to have meaningless, sensual, sensual, sweaty sex. And with this, all other aspects of human being, of existence, for the sake of experience. For what are we but sensory beings, feeling, laughing, knowing? Each moment is unto itself a unique experience, and there is meaning in that, not for any ulterior motive, but for the benefit of that moment itself, and all that perceive it. This is truly the spirit of what it means to find value in individuality.
Wow. That's a lot there. I think the important thing for a lot of people is going to be like, even if they're not in the 0.1% that could actually enhance an AI art making endeavor, that just for normal people to be able to have the power to create what we would consider actual works of art with some kind of control over it that's aided by the AI, but not totally, either one. I mean, I think that's one of the things that excites me most is being able to give people the tools to like create pretty wild things, or to have a lot of control and a lot of like very high level creative control, in a way that I don't think we can really give people right now.
Yeah, interesting. But at what point does the creation belong to the person who made it, and at what point does it belong to the AI? I mean, is it the person making the art for the AI, or is it the AI making the art for the person?
Oh, it's definitely the AI making the art for the person.
Interesting, but that doesn't necessarily detract value from it, does it?
No, I mean it's more like, it's less like writing music or like painting a picture than like having a composer or an artist right there, and you can tell them exactly what you want the piece or the painting to be like in very abstract terms. And also that you could transmit kind of your mental state and psychology, like the AI could know all that stuff about you and know how to create something that you'll enjoy. It's definitely not the same exact thing as being creative, like completely as a human. But I mean, already like I'll use the artificial intelligence, like the AI drummer in Logic Pro, and like it's I mean for like demo purposes, it's like kind of amazing because you can, like I said, there's lots of like high level controls about, you know, how many fills there should be and how active each part of the kit is, like the cymbals or the snare or the kick. And then you can split it up by sections and give different coarse grained controls to those different sections. And I think it's interesting because I have this intuition that I'm cheating somehow, but I could, you know, learn how to play the drums and play them in using a V drum kit and get all like the, you know, the little rhythmic nuances, you know, where stuff is like ahead or behind the beat, and different elements are happening at different volumes. Or I could spend, you know, hours and hours programming that stuff in by hand, you know, like in a piano roll, right? Yeah, it's interesting that I think it'll change, or it'll start to change how much of like the menial labor of music, how much of that we feel like we have to do for the music to be, or the art to be ours.